popcorn junkies in New York. Yep, we're reviewing Jordan Peele's new movie, Us. And obviously it's his second film, but of course he's infamous now for directing Get Out, which became also the highest grossing film. I think it's one of the most successful films since Blair Witch in terms of ratio of budget to money made.
Oh, right. Well, I think
one of the things I remember thinking about Get Out was when I first saw it, I thought it was such a brilliantly constructed and architecturally built film that kind of almost overwhelmed itself with cleverness at the end and slightly lost the plot a bit, I think, with the whole sort of drilling into the brain and all that kind of stuff. I could see what he was going for, but it kind of went a bit too far.
I always find very effective the simplest of all, like the person running towards the camera or somebody in the background running. I always find those terrifying. Rather than that sort of deep psychological stuff, which, I mean, Daniel Kaluuya was amazing, as everybody said. But yeah, I thought it lost itself at the end.
The thing, I mean, one of the things that I felt Get Out heralded was the fact that Jordan Peele isn't a director who's just working on the surface. You know, whatever film he's making a film about, you feel that there's subtext. I mean, you know, the thing is there's subtext with every film.
Yeah,
there's always certainly subtext with horror films, but I think given Get Out's very, very clever
central premise,
contorting around the idea of, you know, a black boyfriend going to meet white parents of the girlfriend, and then flipping that into a horror scenario.
Yeah.
You know, it was with kind of excitement that I saw the trailers for Us, because of course already you were asking the question, what are the subtextual things? What is he going at here? What's he talking about? What parallels is he drawing?
Exactly.
So it's with great excitement and anticipation that we welcome his new film, Us, which stars Lupita Nyong'o. She had huge success with 12 Years a Slave. She also has a huge success as a rather small part in the Star Wars trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
But it also stars Winston Duke, who was my favourite character in Black Panther. So there's Winston Duke, who's very funny. He's got good comedy bones. And Elizabeth Moss. You're a fan of Elizabeth Moss, aren't you?
Huge fan.
What's she most famous for?
Handmaid's Tale now.
So Us comes with... Us...
With them.
With them. Us arrives with them.
Yeah.
All acting in it. I liked the way this film started. For me, I felt like I was watching a Spielberg or a sort of, you know, either a Close Encounters or E.T. or it felt very nostalgic and very of its age. And obviously it was starting in the 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
With the young Lupita Nyong'o, who plays Adelaide. So it was the young Adelaide with her parents in a sort of fun fair type situation on the coast. And she sort of wanders away from her parents and meanders off into a ride or a haunted house or a fun house of mirrors, all of mirrors, in which she, and this is going to be a spoiler review, so if you don't want to have your film spoiled, turn away now. And she comes across a reflection, what she believes is a reflection of herself, but it is in fact a doppelganger. It is another version of herself. And she goes through post-traumatic stress, and the film sort of sets the precedent for her to be sort of in, you know, her parents go to therapy. She's
That's
obviously
all told in flashback.
Yeah, this is all told in flashback.
You're given those pieces of information about this, going to psychology, being whatever, in very tiny bits throughout the first half of the film. So you don't know that. You don't know those things about her. You just know that happened at the beginning,
A horrific thing.
a dramatic thing, which I thought was incredibly well done. I thought at that point we're in for an absolute masterpiece, because everything that happened in that Hall of Mirrors was absolutely just sort of horror gold. I thought it was brilliant. Things moving that you could hardly see, and then the final thing where she is sort of confronted, only not confronted, she's confronted from behind in a way, is just petrifying. So that I thought was brilliant.
You're right. So what they then start to do is, you're right, they drip feed the idea that she's encountered a sort of a situation there, because it's not entirely clear whether it's just the imaginations of a young child, or it could have been, you know, the sort of, you know, the very sort of lurid imaginations, couldn't it, of a kid?
Yeah.
I didn't realise at that point that she felt, well, I mean, I'm guessing they thought she had just imagined it and had this terrible experience, and that she was experiencing some kind of trauma.
Yes, and when she explains it to her husband, sort of quite about 3/4 of the way through the film, he's sort of shocked for her, but you can tell he doesn't really sort of quite believe what she's saying.
It starts with a flashback, and then we meet the family, the Wilsons. And it's a very nice family. And again, you know, this is an obvious thing to say, but it just reminds you from the get-go how infrequently you'll see just a normal middle-class family that's black.
Exactly.
And how refreshing is that? It's
Yeah.
just so refreshing. And you realise, I mean, if I'm feeling how underrepresented that is in a movie, because it's represented in this one, I can only imagine that a black audience likewise is just like, thank God we've finally got just a representative family. And I really liked, what did you think of the dynamic between the family members? I really liked it.
It was great. The dad is a typical dad.
He's so funny, isn't he?
Very funny, gets on everybody's nerves, says the wrong thing,
Yeah.
but everybody loves him.
He's obsessed with his own bits of kit, he's obsessed with the car, he's obsessed with the boat.
Yeah, he's a joker. The daughter is great, and she's sort of like, she's like every teenager, she's serious all the time, po-faced all the time.
Yeah.
So it makes, ecological or environmental sort of
Statements.
and then
believes in
gets
conspiracy
nothing,
theories.
looks up in the air. The boy is a sort of stranger one.
Yeah,
really.
I couldn't work out if they were parking something in him
Well-
from the beginning. He seemed slightly distanced from everything. Did you think?
Yes, definitely, and so maybe sort of autism or something. He won't
Right.
take off a mask. He wears
That's
a mask.
true, that's
I mean,
true.
the mask is sort of it's
Yeah.
not particularly frightening or anything, and he doesn't wear it all the time, full face.
No.
But he does wear it on top of his head all the time.
Yeah.
And he gets himself into scrapes. You find out straight away that he sort of locks himself in cupboards.
He's a thinker, he's constantly thinking about things.
Yeah.
And so this family dynamic is really united, and they head off to the coast and they meet up with their family friends, which is the Elizabeth Moss character.
I've just thought of something, sorry to say at this point, and I don't mean to sound critical at all, but I did actually think that the mother, who is Lupita, is the weakest
I know what you mean,
of the four,
within the family.
in the sense of she hasn't particularly got a characteristic that you can say, well, she was this. I never really got an idea of her.
No, that's true.
So-
she wasn't given much depth,
No.
was she, of character?
No. Which in the end, I suppose we can all put it down to the fact that she was so scared as a child. She's never got over that, maybe.
Well, maybe she was playing it that she was a person in trauma.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, from the get-go, that where they're heading off to on their sort of coastal trip is back to the same area, the same beach, where her original trauma took place.
Yeah.
I thought evocation of place, I was really feeling Jaws, right down to the fact that the boy had Jaws on his t-shirt.
Yeah.
But the way in which the beach scenes were shot, and I know Jordan Peele has talked a lot about his Hitchcockian references, and I couldn't help but feel that with the fun fair, we were looking at things like Strangers on a Train, where they have that whole scene at the fun fair, where also incidentally one of the characters has the hyper-situated lighter, and the boy has a lighter, doesn't he, all the way through it?
He does.
And you had sort of clear references to the birds with all the seagulls and all this kind of stuff. So he was riffing, and I like the way Jordan Peele riffs off all of these other films. And then quite suddenly on the beach, they meet with Elizabeth Moss and her family, and these are their sort of white family friends. And I think quite a clear parallel was being drawn between, in a sense, the sort of unity of Lupita Nyong'o's family and the satisfaction they had between themselves.
Yeah.
They were quite they all liked each other.
Yeah.
And yet sort of Elizabeth, what did you think of Elizabeth Moss?
Well, she was. I always think she's
she
great,
is very good,
but
isn't
in
she?
this film, she was playing a sort of not a nice character. Let's just say that. She probably drank a bit too much. She'd had facelifts. She wasn't keen on.
We had a
children.
nice conversation about facelifts.
Yeah, and she's definitely portrayed as not such a nice character as our
Lupita
Nyong'o. And
she's a bitter character.
yeah,
isn't
she is.
Suffice it to say, at some point, probably about a third of the way through the film, but earlier than I was expecting, if I'm honest.
Much earlier than I was expecting.
Earlier than I was expecting, if I'm honest. They come face to face with the doppelganger family at the end of their drive, which I thought was a meticulously and brilliantly handled moment in the film. Did you? If you ostensibly think that there wasn't anything particularly supernatural or odd about it, other than a family standing there, I thought he showed the economy of how you can make frightening frightening.
Yeah.
Without throwing...
With nothing.
Well, with absolutely nothing. They did
A
nothing
sort
but
of similar
stand.
silhouettes just standing there, nothing. And the characters, our characters, say that. The dad says, get off my property. They don't threaten him back. They just won't move. And we sort of feel his frustration. But you also feel, and this is where he was very good, his rising panic, without really knowing why.
And that was very well drawn, because I think that's something that all men would relate to.
Yeah.
There's a point at which you know that a certain demonstration of your masculinity has to, in a sense, have an impact.
Yes.
And if it doesn't, you're going to the next level of well, forget whether I'm in danger, but my family is now in danger.
Yeah.
So I thought they played that really well.
Yes, I did.
And they proceeded to be essentially overwhelmed by this family, weren't they? It was
Yeah.
it's a home intruder horror, sort of, at that point.
Yeah.
This is a film about slippage amongst identities.
Yes.
About the yin and the yang of characters, the dark side, the light side, the shadow side of ourselves, the alter ego, the other in all of us. And I mean, Jordan Peele's talked about his obsession with doppelgangers from when he saw The Twilight Zone and things like that. But you wonder whether, the whole Freudian idea of the doppelganger and how it manifests a threat to ourselves precisely because there's something in it that's so similar to ourselves.
Yeah.
What analogy or metaphor was being driven at here? Because you discover that there's a place in this film not entirely dissimilar to The Sunken Place, where an alternative world of us's, white families as well, live. Because there was, at the beginning of the film, there's a quote that says, Americans have built X many millions of miles of subterranean vaults and tunnels. No one knows what they're all for. I mean, it was a very curious detail, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And that is very much snared with this idea of the other us, the doppelganger us. And so what we're talking about, in terms of the reason I'm bringing this up now with The Boy, is that there's this inference of slippage of identity. And a number of horror films have done that, where you have the familiarity of a character, say a father or a mother. The children in a horror film know that they think that they're trustworthy. And then it's revealed that they've been possessed, or they are something else, or they're another version of that father or mother. Well, this film's playing with that all the way through, because I was feeling, if I was to watch this again, so like say the fight scenes on the boat between the father and the doppelganger father, I wondered whether it was purposefully playing with us with the idea as to who actually survives any of these conflicts.
Well, yes.
At one point we have a very powerful scene where the doppelganger family is sat in front of the fireplace with the actual family looking at them. And in a weird way, once again, where I think Jordan Peele's very strong, and he succeeded with Daniel Kaluuya and Get Out, with the scenes of him sitting in the chair being therapized and then sinking into the sunken place. That scene where the double Lupita Nyong'o says, "We are Americans," which is very powerful, because it makes you stop and you think, my God, what is he saying here?
Yeah.
They're facing themselves. Are they facing the darker them? Are they facing the alternative them? I know what they're facing literally in terms of the film, because the film goes on to explain it. But what do you think metaphorically Jordan Peele's driving at there?
In a way, at that point, I thought he was making a straight reference to poverty, to sort of...
Right.
These are the haves. It doesn't matter that they're black. These are the haves. Clearly they're the haves, because they're friends with Elizabeth Moss character who are the haves. And these are the not haves. And I thought that was sort of... There were a couple of other ways that I thought he showed that. But then it got... My sort of criticism of the whole film was that it had masses of ideas. It showed us the end result of some of the ideas, but then lost itself, I felt, with some of them. So that idea wasn't really explored. And then,
so much more a film, you're saying, of the haves and the have-nots rather than about race. No, because Elizabeth Moss's family has their doppelgangers arrive. And at the point that they arrived, I won't go on to explain what happens, but suffice it to say, it's pretty violent, it's pretty horrific. And very inventively done.
Oh, absolutely.
I thought he lost the power of the doppelganger effect at that point. I felt he'd quite literally diluted the meaning of it, or the horror of it, or the significance of it, because clearly this went beyond being an issue for this family. This went into a much broader issue, a sort of zombie apocalypse issue.
Well, I was just going to say that was the other thing that sort of slightly didn't irritate me, because I was frightened all the way through it, and I was sort of on the edge of my seat. But he kept going between genres of horror, I felt. We'd be in a zombie situation one minute where people were literally almost all walking up a path, and then we'd go back to the doppelganger issue. And exactly as you said, I as soon as the Elizabeth Moss family was brought into it, there's some great bits there, especially in terms of how people are killed. But yes, he seemed to lose something in the truth.
I agree. I think almost the sort of the richness of the horror diminished at the point that it became a broader horror.
Yes.
And you're right. I mean, I think one of the things this film absolutely illustrates, and I think he has progressed even from Get Out, he's a master of set pieces.
Yes.
He's a master of creating mood. And with just 2 films, I mean, you know, he's been quite outspoken about wanting to relish the horror genre. I don't know whether he'll feel after making this that he needs to move on and make something else, but if he was to bed in a little bit like I heard someone else mention Wes Craven and just sort of relish the kind of motifs and explorations that you can have and indulge yourself with the horror genre, I think he could just get better and better. But I do think this film ultimately it kind of founded on the sheer number of ideas that he had in there.
Yeah.
Do you think? It sort of,
I do.
It was like an embarrassment of riches.
It was. I mean, there are some brilliant, I mean, it's almost too many brilliant moments to even mention the fact that that thing that we've just mentioned that takes place on the beach.
Yes.
The boy wanders off and sees something that
Sort of
disturbs him a
scarecrow-like
lot.
thing, yeah.
That's done, and we all know how
So
difficult
well.
that is to do in the daylight on
Yes.
a beach,
Yeah.
with all the things that you've said about it being like almost an old-fashioned sort of.
Yeah.
I mean, that's petrifying. The mirror's petrifying. The actual.
Some really emblematic images, like the boy at the end, because the boy in the
Yes.
doppelganger family has that mask on.
Yes.
There's a lot of masks going on.
Yeah,
in this.
yeah.
But there's that one scene where the car's on fire behind him and he's just standing there clicking his finger. I mean, some really powerful sort of cinema-defining shots, I thought, which you could see again and again. Go, oh my God, that's from us. Because I kept thinking he's gonna lose it in a minute.
Yeah,
it's
he's
gonna
gonna-
lose its momentum. He can't keep this going. But he did.
He did,
And he
yeah.
kept it going almost until about the last 10 minutes. But a little bit like I felt with Get Out, it kind of started to fray a bit too quickly towards the end.
Yeah. And tying it up at the end, I thought was the weakest
Yeah.
of all. Although, in a way, it should be the strongest of all because he's definitely giving us a message in,
Yes.
in those last images. But somehow he'd lost me by then.
Well, the last inference is that, of course, we're in a car not really knowing who's who.
Who's who, yeah. Which is a great idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea,
But
yeah.
somehow he didn't convince me of that.
I did like the idea that, you know, the opening shot, there's an incredibly long shot under the first titles after you've seen the initial setup. There's an incredibly long shot of all the bunnies in cages.
Yeah.
And I suppose, again, it's going to be one of those films that on a second watch, you're thinking you can be really riffing thematically. And I think he's the kind of director, he knows his films. I think he's chucking this stuff in there.
Yeah.
He's almost overfilling it, stuffing it, ramming it full of thematic devices.
Yeah, that's absolutely
Because what
what
often happens is if you shove enough thematic devices, I remember doing this a little bit, not consciously, but with a short film I made, if you shove enough stuff in there, people will make all sorts of connections.
Yeah.
And it does make watching the film a richer experience.
Yeah.
And yet I also thought he slightly threw away a really well-conceived sense of foreboding in that underworld, because I thought as we entered it and went into it, it was really quite eerie and horrible.
No, yes, exactly.
And
But
unsettling.
in fact,
you wondered whether we could have gone there sooner.
Yeah, well, yes.
You know, had a sense of it sooner.
Yeah, and also it. I mean, in the end, all it served for, that underground place with the rabbits, was a fight scene between
Yes.
the real Lupita and the non-real Lupita, which I thought some of the fight scenes were overextended, and I thought so they were just sort of fighting to what purpose? You know.
I thought there was a lack of consistency in the logic of certain
Yes,
fights as well,
there
where
was.
where they would just randomly kill someone with a knife to the neck with one, because it was a key character. They weren't so strong, and I thought. They were at times a little weakly dealt with, because actually you needed a bit more of a struggle just because it was a key character. Now, it might be that on a second watch we realise that which one is fighting which.
Yes.
And I wonder if we'll sense on a second watch, we'll discover from people that there's a lot of slippage between the characters throughout.
And I mean, I certainly felt in that scene where the Lupita's fighting the other Lupita, I thought they're changing.
And that is one of the most compelling forms of horror, I think, is looking at looking at you now in the camera and thinking to myself, you're not you, you're a horrific you.
Yeah.
So that's really, really frightening, isn't it,
it
as a
is.
thought. Or looking at yourself. And I suppose if you're looking at yourself and you're truly looking at yourself and the two yous are truly you, neither one of you is any more right than the other one in thinking that the other one isn't you.
No, exactly.
Oh my God, my brain has just gone mental.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's sum up and let's give it a score. This film heralds, yet again, the re-arrival of a supremely talented filmmaker. We are quibbling here. If this had come from a director who hadn't made Get Out, I'd be probably running around the streets going, flipping out, have you seen Us? It's a really inventive horror film. This is the harshness of being a film critic or being a filmmaker, is that because you make Get Out and it's a huge success, your second film is going to be Get Out is a hard act to follow.
Yeah.
And I think this has a lot of weaknesses and a lot of flaws towards the end of the film.
Yeah.
But in the rest of the film, this is a film well worth seeing and well worth relishing and really enjoying if you're a film lover. Because Jordan Peele, you can feel Jordan Peele enjoying riffing on these other films, but creating something very unique and very original. There's laughs in there. There's two cracking performances.
It's very funny, a lot of it.
Yeah, Lupita Nyong'o is great. They all have to play their alter egos. That's very good. You know, and we've mentioned some of the weaknesses. So I think this is a really admirable and respectful and successful horror film, hot on the heels of Get Out. And he's a filmmaker that I'm excited about following. It's like feeling there's a new Tarantino on the block or something.
Yeah, that's true.
So whereas I would have given Get Out when I saw it probably 9.5, I'm going to give this probably 8 out of 10.
Okay. I felt that although we knew the characters in the film, he gave us their personalities, I didn't feel I'd been given long enough at the beginning before the horror started. Once the actual family of doppelgangers arrive, it then seemed to me that the really interesting ideas got a bit left on the shelf for the fight scenes. Now the fight scenes were I love a fight scene, don't get me wrong. Right. And I think the inventiveness of some of the ways that they fought were great. They
threw away lots of complicated ideas.
Yeah, they did. And I mean, just things that we've mentioned in passing, like, rabbits. Could it have been to do with the fact that wealthy, unwealthy, people downstairs gnawing on rabbit bone? A lot of ideas was somehow said and then not followed up.
Sparked up, but not ignited.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
And I mean, even things around the guy, I mean, I loved the husband, don't get me wrong, great. I loved him. But the bit on the boat when he was fighting it had a really sort of I don't know how to explain this, amateur quality to it, so that somehow, one fell off into the water, couldn't tell who it was, boat stopping, boat stopped. I mean, part of his attraction was that he didn't really know what he was doing.
You made a very good continuity observation, though, where you said he had his glasses on when they come off.
Suddenly, but then it could have not been him. And anyway, I would give it a 7.5.
Yeah, I thought you were heading that way.
Okay.
It is. You're right. I think in assessment, it fires up so many great thematics and ideas.
Yeah.
And it's not that it should necessarily follow through on them all.
No.
But I felt it could have allowed us to wallow in the uncertainty and ambiguity of all those things.
Yeah.
A little bit like Get Out does. I think Get Out has a lot more breath in it.
Yeah.
There's more room to breathe, and there's air and oxygen around Daniel Kaluuya's realisation of what's going on. Whereas in this, I felt he dropped the ball a little bit. He could have had he could have allowed the characters a lot longer to sit with what the hell's going on.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.